Bro. It might be worth sharing the slide deck, Mohammed, so that people know they're in the right place as they arrive and not just a room full of people having a meeting. Welcome as people start to filter in. Hi, Colleen. Hi, Richard. Very welcome. We're going to kick off in the next couple of minutes, but as you do filter into the webinar, it'd be great if you pop your name, your school, what you do, what your role is in the chat as well. That'd be a fantastic place for us to start. Welcome everyone who is just joining. If you could pop your name and your role, what organization you work for, in the chat, it'll be really helpful for our panelists to know who we're speaking with as we get going in a minute or two's time. Great stuff. Welcome if you've just joined us. Do pop your name, your role, who you work for in the chat, and we're going to kick off in 1 or 2 minutes time, pretty promptly after 1:15, and get into things. And this webinar is being recorded, which I think you should have heard a little notification on the way in, but if that is a problem for you, do keep your camera off. Bro. We are expecting quite a few more people into the call, so I'm guessing people are filtering through as we go now. But yep, do put your names and roles in the chat, and we're going to start in a minute or so's time. Brilliant, Mohammed. Let's start when we get to 17 minutes past, because we've got a lot to get through and not a lot of time. We've got people starting to filter through yet just now, and we are recording this, and it'll be shared with a whole host of people, and we'll be sharing the mailing list of people who've joined with the panelists as well, should they wish to follow up with anything. And we're going to get going in just a second. Cool. Let's make a start, and people will start to come through, and we'll all get the annoying Google ping and doorbell as people come through into the room as well. But I just wanted to say a huge warm welcome. We were anticipating around 100 people to join, so I think we're going to get quite an influx of people in the next 3 or 4 minutes. It's obviously always the thing when you start something at 1:15 the hour. There's always people coming from other meetings and things like that too. But a very, very warm welcome to the first in a series of webinars about tackling harmful and abusive behaviours. And we're going to get into a little bit more of what we mean by that as we get going. But I'm going to invite the team that have been working on this at our end, 3 of the team anyway, including myself, of a much wider team, and many of which are in the chat and the webinar already, to introduce themselves quickly. So my name's Jamie. I'm the Director of Programs and Partnerships at The Difference. And I have been at The Difference for 4 years now. It was my kind of 4-year anniversary in September, just gone. So a long time working on our programs, on our partnerships, on the reach of the programs that we deliver as a difference and the work that we do. Prior to that, I was a primary school head teacher in Northwest London. I led a school from inadequate to good, collapsed in a big heap, thinking about the journey that I'd been on, and having had to use exclusions, had to set up an internal AP as part of that process, thinking a lot more about those pupils in my school who perhaps came back in year 7, back to the primary school, which I was leading, saying, I've been excluded. It hasn't worked out in that kind of first year of secondary school. So that is at the point at which I interacted with The Difference. I'm very pleased 4 years later to be still with The Difference and working on a range of things, which we'll get into today. Mohammed, if I'll invite you and then Emma to introduce yourselves, that'll be a great start.
Thanks, Jamie. So my name is Mohammed Abdallah. I am the head of the Inclusive Leadership course here at The Difference. Same as Jamie, I've been at The Difference for 4 years now. We started on the same day 4 years ago. I won't go on about how it was our anniversary, etc. However, prior to being at The Difference, I was a senior leader in an all-through school with oversight of inclusion, safeguarding, and also our internal AP there as well. And so my primary focus there, as it is now, was thinking about how we improve our whole school inclusion offer, keeping our children safe, giving them a sense of belonging, and also reducing suspensions and exclusions for children who experience vulnerability and disadvantage.
Hello, I'm Emma Simpson and I'm the Senior Research Manager at The Difference, and I've been at The Difference for 1 year. And before that, I spent many years in secondary schools in London. I've got an English specialism, then moved up into leadership position, and then I worked in a school improvement team in Islington and became involved increasingly in work around equalities and thinking about kind of how to make education more inclusive. And I started out doing some research there, and then I've carried that on over into my role at The Difference. And I've been doing work around internal alternative provision recently, and looking at this strand about tackling harmful and abusive behaviours. Great to be here. Mohammed, Jamie, I'll pass back to you.
Thank you so much, Emma. So this, as I said, is a first in a series of webinars where we're looking at tackling harmful and abusive behaviours. Mohammed's going to touch a little bit on what that actually means, what that kind of phrase, as we call it, means in just a moment. But it's fair to say that this has come about on the back of a lot of the work we've already been doing at The Difference, but also in response to the riots that we saw here in the UK over summertime. And it was very stark to us in terms of just the scale of the issues that we're facing as school leaders. And there's obviously a big debate about what schools can and can't do. But if you're in this room, there's a good chance that you're probably aligned with us in thinking that schools have a role to play in tackling some of the biggest issues in society. So things like misogyny, far-right radicalization, incel culture, tackling misinformation. And as well as sharing some of the differences thinking around these things today, we've got a great panel of speakers who have assembled like a sort of Power Rangers of tackling harmful and abusive behaviors in the chat today. So I'm not going to dwell too much and talk too much, because the panelists and Mohammed will take it from there. But it's definitely worth going through a couple of housekeeping bits as we go. And can I just say a huge thank you to everyone who's joined. Obviously, we've got somebody, Rose, dialing in from New Zealand, has woke up especially early to be on the call at 4 a.m. this morning. So massive appreciation just for being here, and there's lots more people who will receive the recording as we go as well. Housekeeping bits to go through really quickly. The meeting is being recorded, so if you don't want to be on screen, do switch your camera off as we go. We hope as many people as possible can keep their cameras on too. There'll be lots of questions that you'll want answering as we go through, so do put them in the chat at any time. And myself and Emma are going to support Mohammed in kind of bringing those questions to the front as we go through too. Mohammed, I'll go to the next slide and talk through a little bit about The Difference if it's your first time interacting with The Difference. There's a good chance that you being here means you're subscribed to The Difference's 4 Bullet Friday newsletter, or you know somebody that has been. But The Difference exists to improve the life outcomes of children experiencing vulnerability and improving the expertise of those who educate them. And we do that through 3 different ways. I'm going to send some of this information out after the webinar in case you would like to interact with us further. They are people, practice, and policy. And I do believe if you're here, there's a good chance you've already seen or heard of our Who's Losing Learning report. And that sets out the scale of the problem that we've got, and that The Difference is set up to try and tackle. So thinking about who's missing school, who needs to be more engaged with school as well. Our programs have 3 kind of core inclusion principles at their very heart, and some of them you'll recognize if you've done our courses, and some of those you'll recognize as we go through the webinar today. All children have learning, well-being, and safeguarding needs, and it's impossible for school leaders and teachers in schools to know exactly what those needs are for any child at any given time in their entirety, and often they're not always visible. Relationships are integral to learning, so lots of the work we do focus on relational practice and demystifying what that means in essence for school leaders. And practice and system development, which Mohammed is definitely going to touch on in his section in just a moment, is key to whole school inclusion. I'm going to hand over to Mohammed there. That's a very, very short, because time is quite short today, introduction to the difference. There'll be lots of follow-up and lots of time for questions as we go through. Thanks, Mohammed.
Thank you, Jamie, and thank you for, I guess, setting the scene with those principles, because they will be kind of re-emerging kind of set of themes that I think every single one of our speakers are going to speak to across today's session. And I kind of want to again set the scene around like why we are here. And Jamie touched on kind of the events of the summer, and the violence and riots that we saw in the summer that I think shocked the nation and shocked all of us in this room. And they had a significant impact on communities and on individuals in particular. And I think it would be remiss of me to not talk about the personal impact and the personal impact that had on me as a person from a Muslim family, a person of color in this country, who at the time was thinking about kind of my family and the impact that would have on them, but also what it meant for me and my place and my sense of belonging in this country as well. But the school leader in me was also thinking, well, what does this mean for schools as well? Like, we're here in the summer. And we could see from some of the kind of footage and images that there were children and young people who were also involved in these activities, and they weren't in school at the time. And I'm pretty sure, as the kind of former school leader and myself, that there were school leaders who were thinking about that first day back in school. What are we going to say to those children and those families? What conversations are we going to have? Are we going to have a conversation? And how do I guess, scaffold that conversation? How do I not make this worse when we begin to kind of step into that arena? And I've talked to leaders across the summer, and many of us have as well across the difference, about their feelings, and we hear some of the same themes around kind of feeling anxious about how they approach these conversations with their school communities, and who they work alongside to be able to respond to the events that we saw in the summer. So there is a role that schools have in this, whether they're quite far in that journey, as some schools are, in doing some great work, or they're quite new to that journey. And how can we support one another as school communities and also practitioners who work alongside schools to be able to respond to what we saw? And I just want to emphasize Jamie's point as well, that although we're talking about kind of these race riots in the summer, that actually there is an overlap based on, some of what we saw from the kind of main influencers at the time, with misogynism, transphobia, issues around kind of immigration and migration. There are kind of overlapping themes here, and this is about belonging, safety, and harm and abuse. And I think every one of our speakers, and Jamie's mentioned that this is kind of one of many webinars we want to run. We want to be able to speak to many of these themes across these webinars. And when we're talking about harm and abuse, I think there are some kind of main domains of kind of harm and abuse. There's kind of the physical kind of threats or actual acts of physical violence, the emotional aspects of kind of harm and abuse, the use of language, the way we isolate others in our community, or sexual as well. So the coercion or threats to engage in non-consensual acts, and the forum that we saw develop in kind of the Everyone's Invited forum made quite apparent that in schools that was a particular issue that needed to be responded to, and still continues to be an issue now. And when we're thinking about forms of abuse, we are thinking about that drive, that motivation to cause harm, and also disempower those who experience it. And there are a list of kind of different types of kind of prejudice and discrimination that perhaps is being experienced or is being experienced in schools and also in wider communities, but also what many children and young people are absorbing online, and the kind of narrative that they're either hearing or seeing online as well, and what we do as schools and school leaders and those who work alongside schools to be able to respond to that. And I do think there are kind of three main areas and key stakeholders that we can be working with to be able to respond to some of these challenges. I think there's kind of the kind of initial focus around school leaders and what school leaders can do to respond to this issue. Thinking about kind of bias-informed leadership. How are leaders interrogating their data, data around harm and abuse, data around bullying, that gives them some insight into who is being disproportionately affected or impacted in their school by harm and abuse, or who in their data is being disproportionately impacted by suspensions or exclusions. Being bias informed and being aware of recruitment and representation in their leadership team and across their staff as well, and how representative is it of the communities that they serve. I also think school staff have a role in this as well, and school leaders to support school staff in their professional development and their practice development so that they are bias informed in their interactions with children and young people in their schools, and that their practice is relational and restorative as well. Where relationships do break down, they're able to repair those relationships with their community, whether those be families or with students. And also for students and families, that a curriculum that is bias informed, a curriculum that represents the wider school community and those beyond. And also that we are amplifying the voices of those in our community, especially those who are on the margins, giving them a voice and being able to respond to those voices in a meaningful way and not in a tokenistic way. And how do those voices and how do we engage with our school community to support our kind of system and practice development in our school? And I'm going to keep returning to this in future webinars, thinking about, well, how do we respond to and drive, I guess, impactful change through these three stakeholders and groups within our school community. I'm going to hand over to our first speaker, and Emma's going to do a bit of an intro before we hand over to Yasmina. So I'll stop talking there and I'll hand over to you, Emma.
Thank you very much. So we're delighted to have Yasmina presenting today. So Yasmina is the Deputy Lead of Hemisphere Education, which is an innovative brain training platform disrupting bias and improving racial literacy in schools. She's driving the adoption of Hemisphere across the UK, building partnerships with leading schools, education partnerships and MATs to empower senior leaders, teachers, school staff and students to create fairer, happier and more inclusive educational environments for everyone. Prior to Hemisphere, Yasmina led multi-award winning teams at market-leading companies, including one of London's top 10 startups, Beam, and the Magic Circle law firm, Clifford Chance. Her work to open access to opportunity and create meaningful social impact has seen her feature in the BBC, the lawyer and black tech firm FitFest. She combines strategic acumen with a commitment to social justice and is passionate about the role that the education sector plays in creating a more inclusive society. So Yasmina, over to you. Looking forward to hearing what you've got to say.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that introduction, and hello everyone. It is great to be here. So I have been introduced, so I'm going to dive straight into talking about my passion for the education sector and how that relates to the work that I'm doing now. So as you've heard, I've spent my career working to open access to opportunity for marginalised groups, and I've done that in a number of different contexts, but typically further on in people's careers and or lives. And at each point, I kept thinking, if I had met this person earlier, if there had been an earlier intervention, this could have had a drastic change on our society overall. So how do I go about taking a preventative approach rather than making interventions quite late down the line of someone's life? And that's what really led me to want to focus on working within the education sector to tackle inequality. Hemisphere Education is what I'm going to talk about today, and I'm going to share some insights from the programme, which hopefully will get you thinking. And Hemisphere is the latest product from a company called Rare, and we're multi-award winning experts in race equity in both education and employment. And when we started out, we started in 2005 working to diversify elite institutions. So to give an example of that, we work with 95% of the UK's top law firms. And we've drastically helped them to change the diversity of their intakes. And so if you look just at the Magic Circle law firms, so the top 5 law firms in the UK, 1 in 5 of every trainees comes from Rare. But what you start to realize very quickly is that diversifying these institutions is not good enough if you don't retain this top talent and ensure that everyone has a positive experience in these institutions. And so initially, Hemisphere was born out of a desire for our corporate clients to shift institutional culture, so that when they were spending lots of time and investing in upskilling these top grads, they would keep them. And at the same time that we were doing that work with employers and had launched Hemisphere, which is being used by Clifford Chance, EY and HSBC, we were working with the universities of Oxford and Cambridge. Now, in 2012, there was a lot of media attention, specifically about the fact that Oxbridge weren't accepting many students from Black heritage backgrounds. And we knew it wasn't due to a lack of talent or indeed aspiration. And so we wanted to do something about it. And we built a program called Target Oxbridge, which over the past 12 years has helped 500 students of Black heritage to get offers from the universities of Oxford and Cambridge. And in doing so, intimately understood the experiences of Black children in British schools. And we were looking typically at these high-performing candidates who wanted to go to Oxbridge. And we were hearing a lot in their lived experience that actually mapped to what we were hearing later on in people's careers. And so we started to think, how can we work hand in hand with educators to create a version of Hemisphere for the education sector? And that was really where it was born. So Hemisphere is designed to eliminate outcome gaps for pupils from ethnic minority backgrounds. It's a brain training platform that every single member of the school community does. And it helps your staff to identify and disrupt the specific types of bias that impact children from different ethnic backgrounds, understand the links between belonging, well-being, and outcomes, and take action to change outcomes for pupils, whether that's addressing attainment gaps or looking at disproportionate sanctions for particular demographics or indeed exclusion rates. It helps everyone to understand how they can make a difference. In terms of impact, I'm going to touch lightly on this slide before I get you thinking, and I'm going to invite some interaction. We have rolled out our training with over 15,000 users, and I'll focus on the impact on staff. 85% of staff say it covers topics not taught in other training or CPD, meaning that whilst there is a lot of work that has already been done to advance race equity, there is room for more and upskilling people on an individual level. And what's interesting is that 85% also correlates with the percentage of teachers in the UK from white British backgrounds, meaning that the lived experience of growing up as a Black or a South Asian or a Chinese child, it's not the lived experience, it's something to be learned, something to be developed. It is like any other literacy. You learn it over time. Year 1 of the training focuses on the experience of Black pupils, and 87% better understand Black pupils having done the training. Why is that important? Well, to make an impact, to ensure that you're driving belonging and catering to the needs of each individual child, you have to understand them. And importantly, 90% of people commit to making changes to their practice. Why is that important? Well, that is how you create cultural change. That is how you change an institution. Every single person that forms a part of the culture makes small changes in their day-to-day. So I'm going to ask a question, and I'm going to give you something to ponder, and I'd love to invite you to write in the chat box. Is racial inclusion a teaching and learning priority at your school? The reason that Hemisphere has had the impact that it's had is because we place racial literacy and racial inclusion as a teaching and learning priority. And I'm going to give you an example of why using my own experience. So I grew up in North London, went to local state schools my whole life. My mum works in a primary school. My grandma was a primary school teacher. So I had lots of extra tuition, was very comfortable in school environments. And I did incredibly well at school and had super diverse people around me, very diverse school. And then I went off to uni. And I went to an elite uni, and I was often the only person of colour in my lectures and my seminars, and I often felt quite out of place. And my results after my first year were pretty shocking. I just about passed, and I had gone from being a high academic performer to scraping by. And the feedback used to describe me was that I was nonchalant, disengaged, didn't seem like I wanted to be there. Can anyone take a guess at what might have been happening for me to have got that feedback? I'd love to invite you to write in the chat box. And no answer is a wrong answer, but I will tell you about my experience. Give people a second to type. So what was happening there is that I felt misunderstood. I felt that stereotypes were being put on me, the angry Black girl. I often felt that I was speaking on behalf of everyone of Black heritage, because that's the impression that other people gave. And so I didn't feel particularly safe in the space, and my brain just didn't work as it did previously. Why is that? So I want to play you a video about learning brain and survival brain. And this is really what hemisphere training focuses on. So without further ado, I'm going to play and not do any spoilers. Oh, I don't think I can hit play. Maybe Mo, you'll be able to help me.
The UK education system adds less value for Black children than for children from any other ethnic group. Why? The work of clinical psychologist Jacob Ham may provide an explanation. Ham distinguishes between learning brain and survival brain. We're in learning brain when the front part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, is in control. The prefrontal cortex is in charge of decision-making and problem-solving, allowing us to plan and think about the consequences of our actions. It's also responsible for attention and motivation, helping us to ignore distractions and control our impulses. Learning brain is open to new information, comfortable with ambiguity, can pull back and see the big picture. In learning brain, children feel calm, curious, and playful. They're not afraid of making mistakes because it's part of the learning process. They feel confident that if they apply themselves, they've got a good chance of picking up what they're here to learn. Big emotions like anger, fear, or anxiety can activate our stress response system, causing the prefrontal cortex to shut down because, in a crisis, our brain sees reasoning and empathizing with others as non-essential. Our stress response system centers on a part of the brain called the amygdala. It helps us to react to danger or stress in order to keep us safe using the survival methods of fight, flight, freeze, or submit. When the amygdala is calling the shots, we're in survival brain. Survival brain is hyper-focused on threat, on tone of voice and body language cues rather than words. It doesn't like ambiguity. It wants clear, hard facts. Survival brain makes people feel panicky, a little obsessive, and afraid of making mistakes. Students don't want to be picked on or raise their hands to ask questions. They're filled with doubt about their own ability to learn. They just want to get it over with.
So I'm going to pose a couple of questions now and think about the types of interactions that can trigger survival brain. Now, Mo gave an example earlier on when he talked about the riots and feeling very uncomfortable and wondering what your place is. But let's get more specific about the experience of pupils in our schools. So if you're happy to take to the chat box, I'd love you to take a guess at the percentage of South Asian pupils who felt that they had to be less themselves at school because of a characteristic related to their perceived, actual racial, cultural, religious background. So the options are 30%, 74%, or 85%. And then I'm going to play another video with some examples. Nicola, quite consistently guessing 74%. You are correct. So let's look at how this plays out in schools. And I might need you to play.
Many children of South Asian heritage can face a choice between their education and their identity. 74% said they felt they couldn't be themselves because of an aspect related to their religious, ethnic, or cultural identity that they felt obliged to hide.
There was a boy, I was speaking to him in my own language, which was Punjabi. And I just hear like people, laughing behind me saying, "Oh my God, look at her." And she made a really nasty comment. Everyone just started laughing, and it just made you think, okay, well, I can't even speak in my own language.
I remember year 7, year 8, on Own Clothes Day, I decided to wear my cultural clothes because I liked wearing my cultural clothes. They look cool. And I just remember at the time people being like, "What are you wearing?"
So, for example, it would be Ramadan. Someone would be like, "Why are you not fasting when I'm not Muslim? Why are you not praying? Or why are you eating this? Or why are you doing that?" People would just be ignorant and the differences and different cultural norms that people have.
So again, putting this in to the frame of being a teaching and learning priority, if this is happening to children in schools, how are they going to best engage in their lessons? Another question here, and I'm going to give you similarly 3 options. What percentage of Black heritage pupils experienced overt verbal or physical racism? And I once had someone ask for a clarification point, does hair touching, non-consensual consensual hair touching count? And I said, yes, it did. 52%. This is a very upskilled group, again, correct. And a quote here that was particularly powerful. People would speak in African accents to mimic the way they think my mum would speak. They would assume I liked fried chicken. They would assume my parents beat me. I would just laugh along with it, but on reflection, it was quite bad. You wouldn't mind hitting play? Thank you.
And 3/4 of Black students who'd made a racism-related complaint said it wasn't taken seriously. Black students report greater scrutiny, lower expectations, more punishment for displaying their cultural norms, and more overt racism, which often isn't taken seriously if reported.
So again, putting that into the context, what does this mean for people's ability to learn? I'm also going to ask a question because sometimes people say, okay, it's useful to understand the experience of students from ethnically diverse backgrounds. What about our white pupils? Now, in a recent study that Hemisphere did, what percentage of white students felt unable to discuss race or racism openly and honestly at school? I'm not going to give you a percentage here. I would like you to guess, but I'm going to give you one clue, which is that it's higher than you think. So again, please take to the chat box. Jenny is closest. 100% felt unable or uncomfortable when discussing race. So what does that mean in terms of the environment? Well, it means that people might avoid their peers because they're not sure how to engage. It will mean that certain interactions that might have microaggressions included are kind of brushed under the carpet. People don't know how to behave as a bystander, to intervene. And so it can create a culture where concerns and issues to do with race are just swept under the rug. And that's not what we want. And if we go back to thinking about learning brain and survival brain, well, white pupils might well be in survival brain too. And now your staff. Now, this is a question for you. I don't have the answer to this, but what percentage of your staff would appreciate support to feel more comfortable discussing race or racism openly and honestly at school? And this is every member of your staff, your lunchtime staff, your senior leaders, your governors, your educators. I'd love to hear. And as I say, I don't have the answer for this one. I can see someone, Liz, you said 75%. Yeah, typically people say quite a high number. And that really is what this work is about. How do we empower every single member of a school community to be a positive driver of cultural change? This is what a couple of staff have said about Hemisphere, which is lovely, motivating, stimulating, thought-provoking. It's relatable to all staff and has promoted thought-provoking discussions, and it improves everyone's thought process. People want to do this work, and in my experience, educators come into the profession because you really want to make an impact on young people. You want to create a positive impact, and giving people the tools to do so is incredibly powerful.
Yasmina?
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to stop you there only because we're just running out of time. But we're going to send an email out after, and a lot of the information that I think you're going to present later, we can attach to that email if that's okay for you, Yasmina. But judging by how engaged everyone was, I'm sure people want to know more. I will add your contact details and so on onto that. And people might have some questions for the end as well. But
awesome.
Yeah. Thank you, Yasmina.
Thank you. I'm going to whiz us on to our second presenter, who's Megan Greenwood, is the Schools of Sanctuary Coordinator at City of Sanctuary UK, and also works on their Further Education Colleges programme. Megan previously worked both in the UK and abroad in the formal and non-formal education sectors, and has an Erasmus Mundus Master's degree in Education Policies for Global Development. Megan, over to you.
Thank you so much, Emma, and thank you as well, Yasmina. I was really enjoying your presentation, and I hope I get to see the rest of it towards the end or in the follow-ups. I'm going to try and give everyone a really quick introduction to Schools of Sanctuary, so please forgive me for really whizzing through it. But before I talk about Schools of Sanctuary, I first need to talk a little bit about the organisation I work for, which is called City of Sanctuary UK. Now, City of Sanctuary UK is a really small UK-wide charity in the refugee sector, whose vision is that the UK should be a place of safety, welcome, understanding, respect, and belonging for people seeking sanctuary. Now, by people seeking sanctuary, I mean anyone who has been forced to flee their homes and come to the UK to seek safety. So this means people who may be refugees, people who may be asylum seekers and other forms of forced migrants. But at City of Sanctuary UK, we prefer to use the term people seeking sanctuary to put the people first and foremost, ahead of the labels that are often very arbitrarily assigned to them and really dehumanizing. Words have power, and so this is one small way where we can start to shift this understanding and think about welcome and belonging. Now, City of Sanctuary UK tries to achieve this vision in two main ways. So we started as an umbrella organisation for over 100 community groups spread across the UK. And these community groups provide direct support and a hand of friendship to people seeking safety in their local area, whilst also trying to raise awareness about their experiences and advocate for a more welcoming and compassionate response towards them. The other area of our work is our streams of sanctuary, or our programs work, essentially where we work with networks of organisations or institutions within a shared field of practice or interest, and help them think a little bit about how they can best welcome and support people seeking safety in their context, whilst raising awareness within their community about their experiences. So, of course, we've got schools, which I'll talk about today, and further education colleges. We also have universities, local authorities, arts institutions, and so many more as well. But importantly, cutting across all of the work that we do, and at the UK level, at the local level, and with our institutions, is co-production, or working with people with lived experience of forced migration and making sure that their voices, their thoughts, their contributions are really centred as all part of this process, and thinking about sanctuary activities as well. But to focus on what you're probably all most interested in, so Schools of Sanctuary is one of our programs or streams of sanctuary. And it's a program that works with a network of actually over 1,300 schools, nurseries and sixth forms spread across the UK. And we have three main goals. Firstly, we help schools to raise awareness about forced displacement and migration more widely, to combat misinformation, but also to raise awareness about the realities of people seeking safety in our communities, help people see the people and behind the headlines that are so common, whilst also helping to create an understanding that migration is not something with which that it affects just other people, but it's something with which we're all very closely connected and which has shaped our communities, made them the places we call home today, made us who we are today as well. Our other goal is to support schools to think about their provision and practice for new arrivals and make sure that they're effectively meeting their needs, especially those from forced migration backgrounds, whilst also thinking about the ways that they can build a culture of welcome, belonging, and safety for every child in that school as well. And then finally, we encourage schools to champion our shared vision of welcome, because I'm sure you'll all agree that schools are the centre of our communities. And so they have this really important influence and really powerful reach. If they lead with values, they can really set a community response, which in light of events in the summer is so important. And I really, truly believe that schools can lead the way with this. Now, through our Schools of Sanctuary programme, we offer loads of different types of support. We offer one-to-one advice and guidance, thinking about the context of your school, for instance, and the communities that you work with. We also work in partnership with lots of different organisations to offer access to unique opportunities, whether that is workshops with people with lived experience, free book distributions, access to online digital resources, and so much more. Because we're a network-based organisation, we always try to connect schools to other organisations and institutions working in this space. And in doing so, my colleague likes to refer to it as weaving a tapestry of welcome, helping to connect the dots, enhance signposting and support for people seeking safety, but basically ensure that wherever they go in their local area, they are met with understanding and support and solidarity. And finally, we share all these things on our website and in our regular half-termly newsletter. Now, last thing I'll really quickly touch on is whilst any school across the UK can take advantage of the resources that I mentioned previously, and they are all free, in 50 parts of the UK, we work with local partners to deliver a Schools of Sanctuary award. And schools that want to go through this process, it is rigorous but supportive, and it helps them think really critically about the way in which they can best achieve those goals that I mentioned a little bit earlier, and the way that that can have the most impact on their community and on their school. To receive the award, schools must go through certain processes, which I'll touch on in a little bit, but also meet eight minimum criteria. And we think this creates quite holistic and broad framework for schools to think about all the relevant areas, thinking about how this all ties in to really create this culture of welcome and belonging. And to talk a little bit about the process. So this process is the same for any institution that wants to work towards a Sanctuary Award, but the learn, embed and share processes. So firstly, the learn is about raising awareness about the realities of people seeking safety in the UK today, and thinking about how you as a setting, in this case as a school, can best support and welcome them. So certainly with regards to children, refugees and asylum seekers, this is about thinking about how your staff are trained and what tools they have to welcome them into their classroom and understand their needs. The embed process is making sure that this is going to be a long-term sustainable effort. So thinking about your policies and your practice and your provision, but also making sure that learning about migration or forced migration is not going to be limited to an assembly or an activity during Refugee Week, but actually you're seeking to really integrate this into your curriculum so that children get a really nuanced and increasingly developmental understanding of these things. And then finally, share is about standing and sharing our vision of welcome with your community and beyond, calling for simply people leading with kindness and compassion, whilst also working collaboratively with other local organisations or those ones across the UK to really try and build momentum behind our vision of welcome. And again, kind of cutting through this, we ask schools to co-produce this with their communities, specifically those who have forced migration backgrounds, so really centering their voices and contributions through that. I hope that's given you a bit of a taste of what the programme's about, but if you have any questions, please do have a look at our website as well, and I'll drop my email in the chat too. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Megan. That's great. I know you've got to disappear off before the end of the session, but if anyone's got any questions for Megan, do pop them in the chat and we'll make sure that she gets them in response. We're going to move on to our next person now, which our next presenter is Ruth Marks from Morpeth Secondary School. So Ruth was a teacher at Morpeth for 15 years and a parent of a student there before moving to France, where she's been working remotely as the CPSHE coordinator for the last 2 years. Along with working with Morpeth remotely, she works with numerous other schools, boroughs, academy chains and national organisations as a PSHE and RE consultant, advisor, author and content creator. And Ruth is going to talk a bit about the work that she's done specifically at Morpeth. Ruth, over to you.
Okay, hi, thank you everybody. And I've just seen that Miss Riley's there, who was the head teacher at Morpeth when I was there too, so it's very nice to see another Morpeth face here. And actually hearing about the difference who Morpeth has worked with for many years, and then hearing about Hemisphere, which Morpeth is also implementing this year, and then hearing what you were saying about people seeking sanctuary, I don't know, it just all feels, yeah, like Morpeth is a really good example to speak about because of the priorities that we have as a school. And I do have to thank Jemima, if she's still on the call, for the way that she steered us in the past through that, because it was just such an inspiration for me. And one of the reasons I stayed there for so long and sent my own child there and everything. So yeah. I work at Morpeth School. I was there for 15 years as a teacher. I joined as an RE teacher, but ended up with in the kind of CPSHE role, and working on many of the things that, having a real interest in many of the kind of cultural shifts that have been spoken about here, particularly to do with active bystanding, working with the anti-racist education group as well. So yeah, a lot of the things you've spoken about so far are things that are close to my heart. But in terms of the curriculum, because again, as Yasmina said, it struck me when you said, sometimes we do things like that are reactive, and sometimes we need to do them beforehand. And what can we do? Or I'm thinking, what could I do in my role? Or what can we do as a school in terms of the curriculum, the kind of day-to-day, what's in there and planned that the students are going to do? What can we bring in, rather than everything being a kind of knee-jerk, oh, this happened in the news, quick, let's do an assembly on it. What can we do to build up skills throughout the time that our students are in school with us? Which is why I was so happy to see the statutory content come in for RSHE and some of the things that included. And even though I've now been through 2 remote Ofsted inspections with a focus on personal development PSHE, I've actually thanked those people for having that focus and it being something that schools are actually shining a light on, which I believe we always were at Morpeth, but I think there's a real focus on at the moment, kind of nationally. I think that's a really good thing. So the way we do it at Morpeth is we have 4 strands of learning that we incorporate statutory and also advised things to cover and things that we feel as a school are important. And actually this year we're bringing in careers as a kind of 5th strand as well, but that's kind of covered for us with living in the wider world. We have relationships and sex education, health and wellbeing, and citizenship and political literacy. So we make sure, so we cover the core citizenship provision through that way too. And we have this all under one aim of helping students make informed decisions, because it can feel quite bitty when you're looking at citizenship, national curriculum and RSHE and the careers. What is it that that whole subject is trying to do that we can say is the aim of why we're doing this as our subject? So we came up with the strapline, helping students make informed decisions after discussing with students and staff what they felt the subject was for. I then ran a competition for one of our students to design our logo, which I put at the top there, and you'll see at the bottom of my emails if I ever email you, to have them, you know, as part of the conversation with us as well. In the past, it's been delivered by tutors to their form group, but that has changed, which I'll tell you about in a minute as to why that's happened. So now we have got strands of teachers who are delivering content on drop-down days that we have throughout the year. not the only time we're touching on it, but that's kind of where the structured curriculum's happening. So teachers are in a particular strand that they then move through the year groups. We kind of had to make that decision. Do we go, the teachers have to teach everything to one year group, or we felt that way they could become upskilled in that particular strand, the particular nuances of the curriculum, even just the platforms that are used, the organizations they're working with, and become sort of experts as they're then moving through. So the year groups then move through those strands, and each year it's like a spiralized curriculum. So they return to certain themes. So it wouldn't be, oh, we've done consent in year 7, we're not going to do that again. We return to the theme of consent in 8, 9, 10, and 11, bringing in age and stage appropriate content examples as they're running through. So it's a spiralized curriculum in that way. But that's not the only time that we're doing this. Also, we have got, that's kind of complemented by our coaching group discussions that happen around CPSHE themes, which I'll speak to you about in a second, but it's a different way that the school has been running pastorally for this year and the previous year. So we have vertical tutor groups of coaching circles, of 12 students from year 7 to 11 together. So for that, once a fortnight, we have got discussion around some of the themes from CPSHE. So they're with their peers for their drop-down days, and then they have this chance to discuss them in this vertical setting and hear those different voices from the community on those every other week when they have that. Those resources are developed by the CPSHE team. That's me and then some writers that are part of the school team as well. And we pay attention to the statutory requirements, but also a big part of what we do is get feedback from staff and students around what they're doing and what they want to see covered and the way that we're approaching these things. So this is just like an overview showing some of the things that we do and how things build in a spiralized way, and through to Key Stage 5 as well. And in sixth form, they continue with having the drop-down days and covering the content. I spoke earlier about how we don't have tutors teaching this because we've got coaching circles. And I think this really feeds into a lot of what's been spoken about today around that relational practice and that sense of community and belonging, the approach that the school have with coaching circles. So it's an attempt to sort of systematize relational practice. Relational practice has been a really key part of Morpeth's approach since I've been there. And this, and you know, talking about trauma-informed practice and restorative conversations, there's a real key prong to the Morpeth approach to dealing with many things really. And this was an attempt to really systematize this and bring many more people in on this. And I heard someone speak earlier about, it's not just about teaching staff, it's support staff, it's the midday supervisors, it's everyone for the whole school culture. And so this is a way to involve so many more people. And it means that we've got vertical coaching circles with 12 students and 1 adult. That might be a teaching member of staff, might be a non-teaching member of staff, but it's an adult who works at the school who is therefore their contact that they have in that much smaller setting of 12 students together. And these are then arranged into houses, so you still have those structures of kind of support like you would have had head of year before you got a head of house. The way this works in the week is you've got Monday, Wednesday, and Friday sessions, and on the Monday you check in the morning, and on the Friday you check out on the way out. So every student in the week has these conversations as a group and with these adults. That's kind of bookending the week. And then Wednesdays allows for assemblies and the non-reading around CPSHE things. So this is like a huge part of the approach the school has to this relational practice, and also still allows us to kind of build on those discussions that might start in CPSHE to then bring it to life more in the different age groups discussing it together. The feedback so far, so we've had 1 year of running that last year and it's running for the 2nd year this year. So it's still kind of early feedback really. Have been so many positive things that have been come back. So full participation is expected from all students. So there's 12 students sat there. So each one has that chance to speak and to say something about what they're discussing and to be spoken to. Staff said it helps their own sense of belonging and confidence, which I thought was really powerful, that it's making them feel more part of this. And like Mina was saying about cultural shift and cultural change, it just really resonated with me when you said that earlier. People have said there's more interaction between year groups in the school. So it's not that like thing where you've got the different years sort of against each other, or one year group does one thing, the other. It's actually making them interrelate more, which again helps with the culture of the school and that sense of belonging and that sense of not, if you're in year 7, not seeing all the year 11s as a threat or you're scared of them. You know, it's a way of connecting with them more and making those relationships. Students have said it's easier to communicate with each other and communicate themselves. And if they have an issue, they turn to their coach. So there's so many more adults that they feel able to go to speak to than maybe they would have perhaps thought of beforehand. And then from the students themselves, of course, I pulled out these two quotes from some feedback that was given recently. In a form group, so typically 30 students, there are too many people, it's hard to be heard. And then this is, I think, is beautiful. It's not like a lesson, it's like therapy. So they've got that 3 times a week, therapy with their coach. And the school is has worked really hard last year and continuing with supporting and training those coaches, because not everyone is, for example, a staff teacher who's used to that kind of thing. So there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes in being able to set it up like that. And I think it's really powerful feedback so far from the students. When I asked the school, okay, have you seen like a reduction in certain behaviours and things? They said to me, well, it's not, we couldn't pinpoint it on a specific thing. It's one thing that contributes with everything else that we do to us having seen a reduction in the number of exclusions, for example, that we've had since we brought this in, but it's part of a package with other things that the school does. But for me, for CPSHE, as I said earlier, that we've done this shift to drop down, but we're continuing with our spiralized curriculum. We have got the same numbers as we had before with the old model, but it's taught on one day rather than across 8 weeks. So before you would have had a unit every other week you were doing it, whereas this time they can do it in one morning. And the strands of teachers are trained up to then do that, and they have a meeting beforehand to go through the content they're doing, so they feel confident and they feel able to handle tricky questions or how to set up the classroom for it to run well. And this also means that we've actually got a lot more time for workshops, performances, outside providers that the old model didn't really allow, because you're asking people to come for 50 minutes once a fortnight across however long to get to every single class, which made things logistically trickier, which means we've been able to take advantage of different theatre productions to come in and speak to the whole year group, different people to come in and run workshops with us, which we weren't able to do before. And it's also meant that there's more staff that can be involved, which has meant we've had minimal cover requirements so far on the drop-down day that we had. We've used different outside providers, the Loudmouth production, working for Marcus. I don't know if people have heard of this, if you're based in Tower Hamlets or not. Tower Hamlets funded this production, and the students and staff both said it was amazing about touching on child sexual exploitation, grooming, and gangs and things like this. And that was a really powerful production that happened because we'd sort of changed to this system. We were able to put this on and have them in there the whole morning. We work with organisations like Life Lessons, I don't know if you've heard of them, who have videos modelling young people discussing some of these issues. And then the young people in class can have those discussions too. And they have people from a wide variety of backgrounds speaking and talking about their experiences, and that again has been quite a powerful thing that we're using. And then we work with other local organisations as well to be able to do this provision, but we still have that emphasis on the curriculum that we're following, rather than oh, someone wants to come in and do something, okay, quick, we'll put it on. It's always part of that planned sequence that we have of the curriculum that's running through. The quotes we had from staff from our drop down was that it was really enjoyable and engaging, really good to have the providers in, and it actually gave them time to contribute, reflect and learn, whereas before I think those kind of quick lessons once a fortnight, they weren't able to really get into and have the kind of discussions that we need to have sometimes in CPSHE. So that's how we run the CPSHE curriculum. But one other thing that I've been really privileged to be part of in the school is when we did some research around the students for discrimination and things that they felt were harmful languages and behaviours that would be used in school, we did some staff and student surveys to sort of get some of that data, which again was spoken about earlier, and interrogate that. From some of the feedback, groups of students that we spoke to about their experiences in the school, some of them said, we don't just want to have like punitive punishing of when people are discriminated against or when certain incidents happen. Can we be celebrating our differences and see it as a strength in the school? Could we do something where we all get to celebrate, for example, our cultures and our backgrounds? So Yasmina, again, to say about your presentation, when you said that the girl on Own Closed Gay was ashamed of what she was wearing, I honestly was like, felt like tearing up, because it reminded me of we have Cultures Day. Well, the first year was Cultures Day, and anyone could come in wearing, it wasn't just about wearing that, it was about doing things in class, doing things in lesson. We had treasure hunts around the school. We've had, lots of different activities happening. But it's just beautiful when everyone feels able to come in and really be proud of what they're wearing and who they are. And so, we gather everyone together for a photo, and the staff getting involved as well. And that came from the students, but I felt in my role and with the backing of the school, I was able to try to help it run and gather staff and students together for it to happen. So we've had it for 3 years running, and it's become Cultures Week. And then that's become Cultures Day, Cultures Week. Oh, and a summer fair when we're going to get people in. Oh, and the winter fair. So it's for me, it's that is a big part of it, as well as the curriculum. And so it's several things together, and that's what I love about Morpeth, is that we have been able to kind of take this idea from the students and then run with it and then see where we can go. And for me, I was learning how to cook. We did a Somali food cooking class for staff and students, and I was learning how to cook these amazing Somali dishes from a mum whose daughter had been in my tutor group 7 years ago. Now she was a nurse, and it was just this connections with our community and learning about each other is a really big part of, I think, what's made it a success at Morpeth. But not to take away from the curriculum from CPSHE, but I do see the two as kind of going hand in hand. Yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions if people have them, or direct to people at Morpeth if you're interested in how they do things. But yeah, feel free to ask me any questions if you have any.
Thank you so much, Ruth. What an insight into the sort of nuts and bolts of how one school has really promoted this sort of safety and belonging. Thank you so much for that. We've got our last presenter now. We've got Kirsty Bailey from the National Literacy Trust. So the National Literacy Trust's Alternative Provision team is dedicated to supporting literacy development among young people who are excluded or at risk of exclusion from mainstream education. They've developed 2 programs to enhance media literacy skills, which can prevent online harms. So Empower is our media literacy program aimed at students, helping them discern between real and fake information, fostering discussion and promoting responsible online behaviours. Media Literacy Leaders is designed for teachers, providing comprehensive training for leaders to embed media literacy throughout their schools. So I'll hand over to Kirsty now, and we'll have sort of 10 minutes of Kirsty, and then hopefully we'll have 5 minutes at the end for any questions. If you do have any questions, please do pop them in the chat so that we can pick them up at the end. Over to you, Kirsty.
My colleague Jim's here as well. I think he's going to introduce kind of where we've come from in terms of our programme so far.
Hey everyone, yes, I'm Jim Sells. I work with Kirsty, and Kirsty's doing the big part of the presentation, but just want to say thank you very much for having us on the call today. It's been really inspiring and quite humbling to hear from the previous presenters as well. So, you know, we're looking forward to being in touch with your organisations because I think you're fantastic. So, little quick intro to the National Literacy Trust. So we as an organisation are absolutely about social mobility. We are an independent charity. We work with thousands of schools across the country, but we're also, we work in a place-based manner. So we have 21 locations and 21 literacy hubs where we really focus our work on areas organised by sort of deprivation and high deprivation but low literacy levels indices. So that's our core work, but we're also really concerned with influencing government. And our research piece is a big part of what we are. Oh, sorry, I just got a bit of echo there. A big part of our work. So we run what I like to describe as the world's biggest literacy survey, our annual literacy survey, which has about 80,000 young people feeding into it. So that piece of work really feeds into our work, into our programmatic delivery. So that's a little bit about the NLT. So we have been working since 2019 to support young people who are excluded or who are at risk of exclusion. So we've been working with the difference a little bit as well, and we're keen to build that relationship. So our first program is sort of built on the heritage of our activity, which has been working through sports clubs, where we've been training coaches to go out and deliver literacy activities into schools. And we found that our Game Changers program, which was one of the first programs, as far as we understood it, which was a bespoke piece of work written specifically for these students, because as you will all know painfully, there's a lot of work which has to go about turning around primary focused resources that are not completely disengaging. And these were a really really well received set of resources and as training to support schools, to support the coaches as well, who are delivering directly into schools and into settings, with a reading focused literacy intervention with some really fantastic, engaging, exciting, relevant texts, and underpinned by relatable role models. So role models with actual experience, lived experience of having come through a lot of the experiences that the young people that we're working with have been faced with. So this was a program which had kind of quite a natural attraction for lots of boys, and was really, we built this because we were looking at the high proportion of young men that have been excluded and who are at risk of exclusion, and we delivered this program, and to great applaud and good response, but also it's impactful and having a good impact on their comprehension of reading skills and engagement and motivation. But of course, we did have a really useful piece of feedback, which was, this is great, but what about the minority within the minority? What about the young women who are here and are, you know, not really engaged with this program? Can you support us with something for this? So we found the absolutely immense Kirsty Bailey, who delivered and created the program Represent, to address some of the issues that were brought up for that. So Kirsty, seamlessly onto you, please.
Yeah, so Represent was an RSC based program. We decided that we wanted to appeal to girls more by looking at the things that they were most interested in, which is where this one come from. One of the things that we got from our external evaluation, one of the things that we learned, was that an RSC first approach was really successful for this cohort, and we've got a plethora of fantastic case studies that come from that. But one of the things is that the students seem to really learn and grow in the intimacy of these small group dynamics, and that's something that we took forward in our Empower program. So Empower, all the learning that we developed with Represent went into Empower. This is our media literacy program, and I want to start by acknowledging that the whole complexity of the internet, it's often portrayed as a place full of danger, the misinformation, the disinformation, all that harmful content, but it's also a place of really immense potential, and it can democratize access to information and provide countless opportunities for learnings. It gives a voice to those who might otherwise go unheard, and it was this that we wanted to leverage. We wanted to leverage the power of the internet whilst reducing its risk, so equipping those users, those students, with the right skills, and this is obviously where our media literacy program comes in. So we believe that this has got a really critical role in combating online harms. So with the right education, we can help young people to navigate that digital world confidently and critically. We want to change them from being passive consumers to something that's much more empowered. We also know, though, that students with prior offline vulnerabilities are much more at risk online, and the significance of their online lives is greater. There's studies into that, and this is why we developed Empower with this cohort in mind. So it's a media literacy program designed specifically for secondary school students. We have a Key Stage 3 and a Key Stage 4 program, and Empower takes a really neutral stance. It's not aiming to demonize the internet, but just to teach young people how to engage with it critically. So at its core, Empower helps students to discern kind of the real from the fake by giving them the tools to recognize mis and disinformation, just encouraging them to become more thoughtful digital citizens. So again, one of the strengths of Empower is that focus on RSC, and through those discussions, students explore media and social media. Like our Represent program, though, Empower isn't just about consuming media and social media. It's about taking control of that narrative, and it's about helping students to become active participants in the information, which is why it ends with a social action project. So our results were great from our first year of delivery. We doubled the amount of students who could correctly identify real from fake articles. We saw a real dramatic increase in the number of students who said they would check the trustworthiness of sources. We also learned a lot. We learned why they were mistrustful of certain types of media. They didn't understand the media production skills. So they didn't understand what was safe in terms of who would get into trouble for telling them the wrong thing. And so it was making sure we built those into our program. But it wasn't just our students who were benefiting. The teachers have been equally enthusiastic. We had over, we had lots of teachers say that the training was good or excellent. It was actually 100%, with 93% of them saying the same about the programme as well. And so from this, we decided to develop our Media Literacy Leaders course, which I'll talk about a little bit in a minute. But I think this is how we do it. This is our what this might look like. So Empower is grounded in oracy. But we believe that media literacy is not something that you learn by reading or watching. It's something that needs to be discussed and debated and explored in a safe place, which is why we prioritise discussion, giving students room to explore these issues openly. So our first step is really quite straightforward but effective. We assess. It's about making quick checks. It happens in seconds. Students evaluate where the information has come from, what its purpose might be, who it's intended for. And we've deliberately kept the terms of origin, audience, purpose, because we know that it links them with those GCSE skills, which means that it's much easier to put into the curriculum when there's somewhere that it fits. If they detect something suspicious, if there's some red flags, we can move on to our next step, which is analyse. Here's where they dive a little bit deeper. We start to scrutinise language a little bit more, looking for specific signs of bias or exaggeration. We introduce lateral reading. We often use tabloid headlines as kind of like the original clickbait to kind of teach how sensationalism can distort the truth. And then our final stage is action. And this phase is arguably the most important in terms of preventing online harms. We ask, what should students do when they encounter misinformation or disinformation or any harmful content online? How do they become these thoughtful digital citizens? And in this phase, we teach them 3 key strategies: ignore, report, respond. Reporting, really simple, effective way to challenge harmful content online, takes seconds, completely anonymous, can prevent that spread of misinformation. Responding in certain circumstances can be really helpful, particularly if it's challenging a friend's view, or maybe asking someone questions to better understand their reasoning, where they're coming from. But we also believe that ignoring can be just as crucial for this age group, especially when it comes to protecting their own mental health. So sometimes walking away from a conversation or those kind of comments can be the best course of action. And one of the core elements that we teach with this is that power of the pause. So most of our online actions happen in milliseconds. It's really quick, thoughtless comments, scroll past. We're asking students to pause and reflect and think before reacting. So that pause can create that space to consider their options rather than automatically defaulting to those gut reactions. So I think we're a bit tight on time, so we'll skip through this next bit, but this is an example of one of the activities that we do. If this is part of our action phase, we give them scenarios. We actually use the game Snog, Marry, Avoid, except the report, respond, ignore. But by forcing them into those categories, we force them to think about actions that they may not normally take, so that maybe next time they might decide to make a different choice when faced with something online. To sort of bring this all together, we know that our Oracy First strategy builds student confidence and self-esteem. It allows them to express themselves. And we really liked, I think Kieran put it perfectly in a summary of the panel discussion at the Labour Party conference in the 4 Bullet Friday. Every child deserves at least one trusted adult relationship. And in an intervention like this, where it's a small group and they're discussing, that relationship can be built. It can be built. Oracy really helps with emotional regulation by providing an outlet for self-expression and fostering that empathy among students. As we said, teachers delivering the programme have told us that they really value the CPD, and from this we built our media literacy leaders. Our first session for that was actually yesterday, but we did record it, so if anybody would like to join us or nominate a member of staff in your schools, you are very welcome to catch up and jump in. And if you're looking for a resource that is available immediately, that's maybe a slightly lighter touch, there is an assembly and a mini course of just the 3 strategies, the assess, analyse, outcome, rather than the 10-session programme that we've also got available on the website. All of these are free, so please feel free to go and take a look. I'll pop some links in the chat now so that you can go and have a look if any of those might be helpful within your settings.
I'm so glad you got the free bit out at the end, Kirsty, as
I
well.
did. I did. I'll pop in the chat now.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. That's fantastic. I think we just got literally a couple of minutes for any questions that many people have got. Questions or comments.
Mohammed, while we wait for questions, would you mind popping up the last slide that we had there? Mohammed, I'm going to out him, has just panic WhatsApp me to say his dog is barking very loudly behind him, and could I finish up the last couple of minutes there? But Mohammed, do take over if the dog has stopped barking behind you. Q&A's in the chat. Just very interesting to see so many kind of aligned speakers, and bringing it back to Mohammed's diagram essentially at the start, thinking about school leaders, school staff, students and families. And it came up in Yasmina's talk about racial literacy being a teaching and learning priority. Ruth, your example of such a well-defined curriculum, that this work can't feel like add-on work. This work has to be front and center and woven into the curriculum skillfully. We've talked about literacy in terms of racial literacy, media literacy today, as well as Megan's kind of like that, the kind of feeling of welcoming into a school. But I think my biggest takeaway and reflection there is around how this has to be woven in to a really intentional and structured way of viewing tackling harm and abuse in your school as well. Just a final few thoughts, and Emma, will pop to you for any questions that come up. We're going to share the recording. There's about 65 people who didn't make it, lots who have sent apologies, who will get a copy of the recording. So Yasmina, I'd really love if we can edit in like your final bit of your second into that recording, which will test my editing skills, I'm sure, but really powerful. And there was a couple of slides that I've seen before, which I'd love to have in there. And Mo, if you wouldn't mind going to the very last slide. If you've interacted with the difference for the first time today, great. If you've been with us before, you'll have heard of some of these things already. But Included Conference is fast approaching. It's coming up on Saturday, the 11th of January, officially the most miserable weekend of the year. Blue Monday is the Monday just after that. We've got harmful and abusive behavior, tackling harmful and abusive behavior high on the agenda. So it's one of the key themes of the conference. And a couple of speakers who you've heard today, I know, will be presenting there as well. So very excited, and you'll be receiving an email with information on as well. We're also about to launch our network for internal alternative provision. So if you're thinking about internal AP, as it's commonly being called, you will also receive in the kind of follow-up email with the recording a little more information about that too. Emma, were there any questions in the chat? Doesn't sound like there are any questions. So let's come to a pause there. Thank you all so much for joining. Panelists, do feel free to stay on for a couple of moments in case anyone wants to chat to you, and we'll share kind of attendee list and speakers list so everyone can get in touch with each other as necessary after the event. But thank you all so much. I'll take Karen out. Karen, thanks for joining us. If you're still listening, we'll see you soon.
The dog has stopped for a moment. He might. Hopefully he doesn't. Sorry to put you in it, Jamie.
No, don't worry about that in the slightest. Jim, Kirsty, Ruth, Yasmina, thank you so much. It was really like kind of segued nicely between all of you as well. So we really appreciate it. Let me introduce you to Irene, because Irene is doing lots of our comms work, writes the Full Bullet Friday at the minute. So Irene definitely will be somebody you'll come into contact with as we go forward as well. How did everyone find it? Did everyone find it okay?
I was fine until I saw Jemima joined. It was my boss for like 15 years. I'm like, what's Jemima doing here? She's the one who brought in all the coaching stuff. And I'm like, oh no, I'm going to say it wrong. And I'm like, I saw her name.
Well, Ruth, I have to say, I did email who I now believe is your new boss, to say how great you were.
Did you hear what John? Oh yeah.
Yeah, I chatted to John yesterday, and I've given him temporary access to the student version of our training. So I actually emailed to say, 1, you're brilliant, and 2, you probably want to see the student version as well. So
Yeah.
look out for an email for John.
Oh, it's everything you were saying. I was just like, oh, this is brilliant, really good. I think it's already being rolled out with our year 12s, isn't it? I think so.
So the student version you haven't done yet. The staff version you're rolling out on the 24th of October.
Yeah, next week. Yeah, I've seen that that's next week. And then I thought it was going to be, anyway, it's part of what I'm going to talk to anyway, yes, it's brilliant. So yeah, well, thank you for saying that to him.
Yeah, of course.
Just when it's people you know, it's like, oh, I know you.
Yeah,
it's fine. But yeah, thank you so much for that. And yeah, just it was really, really brilliant.
No, thank you. Like it was great. I think it worked really well. Like, yeah, just it all aligned really well. And I think I took a risk right at the beginning, showing that diagram and saying, you know, all of our speakers are going to speak to these different parts and these different stakeholders. And actually it did. Like, we were talking about being more diagnostic and curious and bias informed. At a leadership level, we're also talking about like staff practice and like thinking about relational practice, but also thinking about the voice of our community, whether those are our students or staff and so on. And yeah, it felt like it fitted neatly. Yeah, it was great. And also, like, it was a bit of a trial for us. We've never run a webinar like this. I think there's some learning for us about how we ensure that we have a Q&A at the end and that people are able to ask questions, etc. But yeah, it was great to hear you guys speak. There was a lot of learning for me myself.
Yeah. Thanks for hosting. I think everyone's talk really complemented one another, so it was a good lineup. So well done for curating that.
I think you did a really great job there, Mohammed, and you, Jamie. And it's a pleasure to hear you, Ruth, and you, Yasmina, and Megan, obviously, who's not here at the moment. I really agree that it was a really good compliment. I have to say I was channeling a bit of Mohammed there because I had a twin version. So I was really gabbling because I've got these 2 7-year-olds like running in and pulling at me going, "Can I have a brunch bar?" Well, I was just about to come online. I was like, "Yeah, go away." So, you know, I did flap a little bit, I must admit, but obviously, Kirsty, you know, we had a lot to say. You know, we've always got a lot to say. So I think if you're thinking about what to do sort of slightly differently, that space for Q&A is the thing, isn't it? Really, but it was such a delight to be part of a session. He's back. A session like this. So thank you for the chance to hear you guys, as well as to be a part of it all. I would definitely be tapping you all up. Because I'd love to have further conversations, to be quite honest. So thank you for the chance to meet you all.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jim. You put it eloquently there. I will say that there was about 65 people who were planning to join who didn't join. About 40 or so sent apologies, so they'll get the recording. So it'll get well viewed, and we'll put it in the newsletter and on our website as well. So hopefully we'll get a little bit of traction in all of your work from that as well. But yeah, the most important thing, like really great speakers and